my topic is the Salem witch trials. Understanding the times. So they were in frequent conflict with Native neighbors at the time. They're in Salem, Massachusetts. They have competition with their neighboring bigger town of Salem Town. Salem Village is where the actual witch trials took place. It was a small village on the outskirts of Salem Town itself. So Salem Town was a major export-import city, where Salem Village was more of a small agricultural town, not much going on there as there was in Salem Town. So they also had deeply seated Puritan beliefs. They were freshly from England, so it still greatly influenced their fashion, their food, their lifestyles. The Puritan beliefs that they had were so deep-seated that it almost created a paranoia in them, because they were so paranoid about the Native American influence that was going on their borders, and infiltrating their town, infecting their people with Native American beliefs, discrediting their Puritan beliefs. So they were pretty strong about their Puritan beliefs. They were also afraid of the natives as savages, so that paranoia in them was just growing more and more as the trials continued to get bigger and added more people. So these were a couple pictures of their fashion at the time, still super English influence there. The men, the women, the children, they all wore hats. Everybody was in a hat at all times. As you can see, great English influence. The housing, the food, their housing was poor because they were in the small village outside of the Salem town. And their food was very simple: corn, grain, all the agriculture foods that they could grow at the time. This is a little picture for you. So this is Salem town. You can see there's boats, there's big buildings, what looks to be like a little meeting house or factory center there where they're importing, exporting goods. And this is Salem Village. It's very quaint, little steeple, tiny houses, not much going on. Nobody's in the street. There's a bunch of people in this photo all around the boat, unloading, loading. There's just barrenness in this small little village. So that's kind of the setup, understanding the times going on during the Salem witch trials. We know the witch. So this section is about two prominent families, the Putnams and the Porters. The ergot-infected rye, which was a hallucinogenic. Ergot is a derivative of LSD, so that's a pretty big, important thing that we get into later. And accusations in the courtroom. So this is the ergot and rye. This is important because Samuel Parris, he was the priest, kind of like the pastor in the town at the time, and he supported the Putnam family. So Putnam had two daughters, Samuel Parris, who was Putnam's supporter, had two daughters, Betty and Abigail, and a slave named Tituba from the Caribbean. So Tituba baked a cake, and she accidentally used the ergot-infected rye. This is the ergot and the rye, the little dark portions kind of stemming out of the rye here, so it's really easily mixed up. And they weren't scientifically advanced enough to understand that this wasn't rye. This was actually hallucinogenic that they were grinding up in their rye and wheat and putting into bread. So Tituba baked a cake for Betty and Abigail. Well, Betty contracted what's called convulsive ergotism. What that is choking, vomiting, spitting, fits, freaking out. She had massive fits, hallucinating. Now we know, because of scientific advancement, that it is convulsive ergotism. But at the time, religion filled the void that science couldn't. So, the simple conclusion is she's a witch, or she has the devil inside of her, or whatever. She needs an exorcism, so they tried that. Didn't work. She was still hallucinating, convulsing, freaking out, throwing fits. So they ended up taking her to the courthouse, where they were kind of like, okay, well, she's a kid, but she's still a witch, so we've got to deal with this, right? And so these are the families in the courtroom. Like I said, the two important families were the Porters and the Putnams. They did use a lot of political family agendas and personal vendettas, basically, to get people accused. We'll discuss that a little later, too. Bridget Bishop was the first hanged. She's not actually in this photo, but she's in a photo later. And the very next day after Bridget Bishop was hanged, 5 more were. So Tituba was one of the first among the ones to actually get accused. This is Tituba in the photo. She's kind of like pleading her case, like, I didn't infect the girls. She was from the Caribbean, so she was an outsider, so they were more likely to accuse her of something because of their paranoia, because of the Native Americans and the Puritan beliefs, and they were very like, our own is our own. So because Tituba was an outsider, they were more quickly to judge her for infecting the girls with witchcraft. So that is why she was accused, but she wasn't the first, but it did really heat things up, and it really sped along the rapid accusations that were going on. So the hysteria is contagious. Martha Corey, is a prominent member of the church. Her husband, Giles Corey, was actually stoned to death for being under like witch-like influence, not accused of being a witch, but under influence of like demons, basically. She was a loyal member of the church who was accused, and the town kind of assumed this position of, well, if Martha Corey could be a witch, then anyone could. So we will talk about the Crucible trailer and the 20 other people that were hanged besides Martha Corey and Bridget Bishop, the first hanged. So these are some photos of how they would hang them. From trees, they had big giant platforms in front of the whole town. It was really a spectacle because they were really trying to make example of these people so that witchcraft would be stopped in Salem Village. But in reality, there was no real witchcraft going on. It was lack of scientific advancement, paranoia, and family drama, basically. So this is the Crucible trailer that I'm going to show you. It's a really, really great book by Arthur Miller. What it explains, Arthur Miller, in his book, is he really tells the tale of specific stories and specific families in the Salem witch trials era. So let's go ahead and watch that. So John Proctor's telling Abigail that they don't want to be together. But Abigail's saying, we do want to be together.
They must possess.
I know you, John Proctor. You love me. Whatever sin it is, you love me yet.
What they cannot possess, they must destroy.
I have a warrant for your wife. For what crime? On what proof? Who charged her? Well, Abigail Williams charged her.
Abigail wants me dead, John.
So what just happened was Abigail accused that man's wife of witchcraft.
My words against my wife will be the end of you.
I am but God's finger, John. If he would condemn Elizabeth, she would be condemned.
So that's about all we need to really get into about the Crucible by Arthur Miller. That pretty much shows in that video how Abigail Williams, who was a daughter of one of the prominent families, and John Proctor, who was heavily affiliated with Paris, who was like the reverend at the time, and he was really influenced in the courts. Giles Corey, who we talked about earlier, Martha Corey's husband, they were both extremely prominent members in the church at the time. Very, very heavily influenced the courtroom. And John Proctor and his wife Elizabeth and Thomas Putnam, the head of the Putnam family, the previous very prominent family that we talked about. Well, they were all having a really big land disagreement. There was messy, there was a lot of titles, deeds going around. Everybody wanted this piece of land. Well, Giles Corey ended up stoned in the street for influence of witchcraft. It's pretty funny. And Martha Corey ended up being accused of being a witch, and Proctor's wife, Elizabeth, who was the woman in the video, Abigail and John Proctor had an affair, and so Abigail decided that she wanted Elizabeth out of the picture, so she accused her of witchcraft. Well, it was this whole story that Arthur really goes into in his book. Very, very fascinating. But Proctor ends up hanged. to save his wife Elizabeth from being hanged. He admits to being a witch, all that stuff. So in conclusion, the deeply held Puritan beliefs combined with the witch accusations were the ones that really created paranoia among the Salem village. Religion filled the explanation void that science advancement couldn't at the time, and family used their social status, wealth, and influence in the town to get people accused and hanged for their own personal benefit. The Salem witch trials resulted in hard evidence being necessary for courts to convict criminals. So it wasn't any of this, oh, she's a witch, she's a witch, she's a witch. You needed proof in order to convict someone of a crime. And the Massachusetts General Court actually declared that these witch proceedings were unlawful, and the leading justice, Samuel Sewall, actually made a public apology for everybody accused and hanged, and actually made reparations to the families affected by the Salem witch trials. Thank you.